Hello everyone, greetings from the 7th of Nero, AJ here, continuing a more detailed study of Warbeasts, their nature, and how they came to serve their respective factions' warlocks. This part will address the naturally occurring living Warbeasts as used by minions, Skorne, Circle Orboros, and Trollbloods. Though the Dragonspawn of the Legion of Everblight lack the construct rule in Warmachine Hordes, their lore makes them a little more complicated than the convenience of rules categorization allows. Even so, there's enough to talk about with living Warbeasts without needing to involve them. If there is anything which the Warbeasts of Imoran, the living ones at least, may have in common, it is their convenience to the warlocks who command them. Indeed, this is a theme for all the nations or factions which compete, whether alongside or against, the Iron Kingdoms. And there is a great deal of sense in primarily using what resources are close at hand. For the Trollkin, it is their full-blood fellows within the Creels. For the Druids, it is the creatures of the wilds, and for the Skorne, it is the many menaces of the desert. For the Gatormen, it is the reptiles of the swamps, and so on and so forth. In all cases, proximity or existing blood links, or both in no few cases, led to interaction. Though the manner of these interactions, and thus the means by which the bond with the beast is established, differs from one race to another, as well as the time at which they first occurred, they each set a precedent of a resonance in the warlock, which could then be passed to their successors, forming the basis of warlock traditions. These traditions date back several thousands of years in many cases, while the extant written history of most races, barring the relic dwarves, only record a few thousand years. Enough evidence from what is chronicled along with age-old traditions of lore passed down by word of mouth exists to confirm the resonance as being an ancient magical gift. It has existed for more than 10 times that of the warcaster talent, that much can be said with little doubt. As to the primal magic which can be awakened, conferred to, and utilized by those with the power over beasts, given the nature of evolution, they can change from generation to generation of the same species of beast, while the most powerful can, over the course of their often long lifetimes, acquire a set of these so-called animi, named for the fundamental vitality of living creatures. In all cases, though, a beast's animus reflects strongly an aspect of their natural home or innate inclinations. With enough time bound to a warlock, however, or, perhaps in a much more banal fashion, with enough conventional training as one might train a warrior, a beast can attune its magic to suit the weapon it wields, or the way it fights. As is desired from a weapon of war, albeit a sentient one, what the animus imparts to the beast, or an ally, accentuates or lends its own qualities. This usage appears to be far more common than any magical manifestation which may mitigate any weakness the beast may possess. And, depending on circumstances, beasts can adapt their animi to suit their current needs, if on a very instinctive basis rather than anything consciously intentional. As previously noted, it is highly likely the first race to establish a resonance is the Trollbloods, even if written records or chronicles confirming this do not exist. As children of Dunya, they came into being among the first sentient species of Cain. Broadly speaking, there are 3 forms of Trollblood, which may be considered their warbeasts: the full-blood trolls of the Creels, the wild trolls, and the kings. The former 2 include the larger dire trolls, whether they are those of a more elemental nature or those fitted with weaponry which might be more familiar to the human soldiers of the Iron Kingdoms. In the past, only the full-blood trolls of the Creels were extensively used by Trollkin warlocks, for they were all they needed or had any traditional inclination to exploit. And until relatively recently, few attempts were made to reach out to the elemental full-bloods of the wilds after the defeat of Horfargrimir's Mulgo Confederation thousands of years ago. Eventually, needs must force the Trollkin to eventually seek them out in greater numbers. But irrespective of this, no warlock saw success in doing so with the dire trolls or kings, at least until Horlock Doomshaper. His prodigious strength and intimate understanding of the magical aspects of the kin in the troll concept of kith, creel, and kin granted him the potential to not only overcome the primal power of the dire trolls, but to awaken and calm the great troll kings. While it would take tremendous effort to do so, he imparted this knowledge to his fellow Trollkin warlocks, particularly where it concerns the dire trolls. Indeed, as the nature of war evolved in the modern era, the Creels were compelled to adapt, and the dire trolls bore the brunt of this need in terms of new tactical weapons. The dire trolls, being large enough and strong enough, were those best suited to the adoption and use of certain pieces of Signaran, or Gaidoran in some rare instances, technology. Cruder stopgaps were developed as well, and their use continued for no other reason than what functions well, particularly with the enthusiasm of a 15-ton beast aiding matters, need not necessarily be fixed. In all these cases of dire trolls, though, an amusing side effect of their use was learning of the pigs' strange synergy with them, for they rarely allow any other creature into direct contact so readily, much less to ride atop their backs in control of what may be substantial ordnance. Unsurprisingly, both the beasts themselves and the warlocks who, for the most part, control them, bear the bond of blood among them which, until recently, precluded those of other races from their state of apparent exclusivity. Taking after the Trollbloods in many respects are the Farrow, who would, alongside their fellow Dunians, be the ones to break any illusion of what was once seen as mutual exclusivity among warlock-beast relationships. And this would work in both directions between the Trollbloods and Farrow. The Farrow beasts, though fewer in number and lesser in diversity, are related to their warlocks by biological and evolutionary ties, if perhaps in a slightly different manner from their Trollblood allies. The experiments of Dr. Arcadius accelerated the branching out of Farrow biology, but fundamentally the resonances of the numerous Farrow Warbeasts come to their warlocks with a natural ease mirroring the Trollkin warlocks. Unlike the Trollkin, though, comparatively more among the Farrow race possess the primal magic which is the hallmark of Warbeasts. It seems the Farrow have a greater propensity for it, being a more biomechanically pliable group of creatures, from the Razorboars up to the brutish Warhogs. It is likely the common factor between Trollblood and Farrow is Dunia, which allowed their respective warlocks to exchange knowledge of their residences, if not in absolute terms, then at the very least in ease of adaptation. That is to say, while a Farrow warlock may not be born with the propensity for resonance with any Trollblood warbeast, proximity to them and guidance from a Trollkin warlock can allow them to learn and acquire the resonance with relative ease. Somewhat similar to these Dunians, so far as the relationship between the various beasts and warlocks, are those who rule the swamps around the Blindwater Lake. Beyond the mere knowledge of their existence and analysis of encounters with them, not much is fully known about them, and less is understood. Even so, there are a few things which may be said about them on this particular topic at least. Some of the reptilian beasts which answer to the Gatorman, Bokors and Shamans do bear some distinct evolutionary similarities with them, namely the Bald Snapper, Black-Eyed Wrestler and Blind Walker, all of which have at least some superficial resemblance to the Gatorman themselves. That said, many others, without even needing to contemplate the Bone Swarm, do not. I am no expert on the fauna of the Blindwater, but presumably the Swamp Horror is not related particularly closely to the Ironback Spitter. More importantly, the Gatormen share their bestiary with their occasional vassals and occasional nemesis, the Bogchogs, and have done so for several generations. Both of these races worship a god which I can only liken to an incarnation of the Devourer Worm, Kosk for the Gatormen and Ashiga for the Bogchogs. This would be reason enough to question the fundamental consideration that warlocks have a natural affinity for a set of warbeasts. But the Anura, more colloquially known as the Croaks, make it thoroughly clear warlocks are, in all likelihood, capable of developing by their own will alone the resonance required to bond to a beast it encounters, even if it be for the first time. But I digress. The beasts of the swamp are, or simply that, the beasts of the swamp, and it is this straightforward proximity which dictates their use by the warlocks of the Gatormen and Bogchogs in preference to any other potential warbeast. In common to all who have been mentioned thus far, though, it is the extent of convenience to which their respective warlocks keep to find those who would be their warbeasts. Unlike them, the tyrants of the Skorne and the druids of the Circle Orboros are quite willing to expand their sphere of influence to identify, study, and ultimately subdue new warbeasts. However, the manner by which they accomplish this and the motivations with which they seek to do so differ quite greatly, despite any opportunism which may be seen as shared between them. Perhaps the greatest degree of variety can be found in the Skorne bestiary. Mortithurgy has allowed the Skorne to bend to their will or outright subjugate perhaps more unrelated species of beast than any other group of warlocks in Imoran. Paradoxically, the first group which fell under the Skorne lash may be considered the most difficult to control from a zoologist's perspective. The Cyclopes have been part of the Skorne bestiary for several thousand years, longer even than the Titans, and yet they may be considered semi-sentient. Before they were defeated by and compelled to slavery by the Skorne, the Cyclopes lived in a simple tribal existence, which persisted thanks to their primitive precognition, allowing them to evade or best other beasts of the East, and such ability made them a difficult enemy for the early Skorne. It is possible that such an experience left Skorne beast handlers in a position to better optimize their methods in bringing other species of beast to heel. Indeed, few beasts they send into battle give them much by way of trouble, whether in taming or goading to acts of violence. Aforementioned Titans were always a deceptive weapon, docile until enraged, and thus a perfect warbeast. Among the Skorne houses, wars had been fought over control of the savannas where wild titans roamed. It took several generations of attacks, wars and reprisals for the most powerful among the Skorne dominars and lord tyrants to come to an agreement concerning the allocation and access to herds of titans. But even then, the houses would have no shortage of excuses for making war upon each other. The next species of warbeasts the Skorne would conscript to their bestiary was the basilisk. Drakes and Krayers would each pose different problems given their unique ways of defending themselves, which made it necessary to curtail their natural abilities to be able to use them in battle. For several hundred years until the coming of Winter Railthorn, the Skorne would not add further to their bestiary. But upon the new empire's expansion westward, their paying of beast handlers would become very busy. Perhaps too busy, for they seemed to find uses for nearly anything which might display physical prowess. Though in keeping with at least a broad sense of convenience, all of them can be found in and around the Bloodstone Desert and the neighbouring barren wilderness. The Archidons, which dominate the skies above the Stormlands, fly chief among these oddities, alongside a wide array of what are predominantly lizards, of all sizes ranging from reptile hounds to rhinodons, and a fearsome desert hydra. No doubt the strangest of the beasts at Skorne disposal are the insectoid ones, the various aratices, whether the scarabs, sentinel or soldier. That mortarthurgy is effective on these beasts is remarkable, and likely as much a surprise to Skorne pain-givers as it is to a horrid shock to those who would need to confront these beasts in battle. Irrespective of this, though, the Skorne magic has proven to be an invaluable tool, for not only has it brought them this much varied bestiary, but also many from among the Farrow and Gatormen. It is only supposition at this stage, for they are yet to make known any attempt, but I believe it possible for the pain-givers to bend almost any beast to their will, and thus require their resonances. And this includes the trolls. But where the tyrants of the Skorne Empire are quick to covet the natural brute strength of beast they encounter, with little thought of what comes after, and even if their trust in mortarthurgy is well founded, the druids of the Circle Orboros are certainly more circumspect. While the results may seem as though the druids are as indiscriminate in their choice of beast as the Skorne, a great deal more observation and study go into their process of selection. Being much less militaristic also compels the organisation to compromise in opting for beasts which provide more nuanced use in battle than their Skorne counterparts. That said, where the various warbeasts come from is nonetheless a matter of convenience and proximity, even if the leyline network and the magic of the druids allows them easy reach across a much wider swathe of Western Amarant than most people believe possible, even myself to a great extent. Relevantly to the warbeasts themselves, the living bestiary of the Circle Orboros can be easily divided into two broad categories, the avian and the mammalian. Of the latter, they can be further split into the caprine, the naturally canine, and the not-so-naturally canine, or rather lupine, and whatever the Gorax is. Perhaps an ecologist may enlighten me one day. Matching the remote outposts the druids prefer, all their warbeasts find the distant mountains and the depths of the forests their homes. But the warp wolves are a different matter entirely. Once independent devourer cultists, the sometime human warp wolves transform into their beastly forms on a monthly cycle until age and experience allows them to do so at will. Their villages are, as per last I heard of them, fully incorporated into the realms with direct oversight from the druids instead of merely being of vassal status. Thus, we have voluntary servitude here, which the warp-wolf cultists accepted for their own safety in return for deployment against the armies of civilization, as opposed to the forced enslavement of the Cyclopes by the Skorne. Because of the sheer breadth of the Circle Orboros' reach across Imoran, one thing it appears they have been careful to do is acclimatizing their beasts to fighting in various environments where they operate. Though hailing from the mountains, the various satyrs generally find little trouble in fighting among the trees of the Glimmerwood and the Thornwood. This extends to the griffins as well, particularly the Scarsfell griffin, named for the high canopy forest which is their home. This being said, Rotterdam griffins require a bit of adjustment alongside their cousins before they can fight among the trees with similar aptitude. Almost all of these creatures, as noted here, even the warp wolves, are trained for long periods of time by the organisation's handlers, even years in some cases, to become fully integrated weapons under the warlocks among the druids, which is another contrast to the more perfunctory approach by the Skorne. However, living warbeasts, though they comprise a fairly large majority of all known warbeasts which have been reported in battle or in various skirmishes, there are a few other categories which are both noteworthy, but also important for a fuller understanding of the nature of both warlock and warbeast. Disturbingly for most, this includes the decidedly more unnatural means by which their strength is nurtured and harnessed, stemming from the creature's creation itself.